What's up, everyone? Welcome to Metallicis for another album review. Today we're going to be looking at Heaven Shall Burn and their new album of Truth and Sacrifice. So this album's interesting because it's actually divided into two parts, an A and B section, the truth side and the sacrifice side. But let's look at the album art first, as we always do. So album art's interesting because it'll always kind of give you a hint as to what kind of music you can expect inside. And death metal tends to have much more of a blurred sort of image to it. That the more difficult it is to read the logo, the more brutal that death metal will be, and the more fuzzy and gray and ambiguous the artwork, the more heavy it seems to be. Not always. I'm making an overarching statement there, but and this one's a lot like that. It's a very cool album cover, but it's also very blurred. I don't know if blurred is even the right word for it, but it's fuzzy. And Heaven Shall Burn is barely legible, but still readable, and you can't really even make out Of Truth and Sacrifice that well. But it's a kind of a cool image. It shows what looks like a Valkyrie or a female warrior with perhaps her child who's holding the spear for her. She looks like a fallen warrior, and now the child has to take up arms. And this can be symbolic of all kinds of things, like an unjust world where children are having to take up arms to defend for their parents, or that women are having to fight to protect their young, or whatever it might be. There's all kinds of symbolism there. So it's actually a lot of depth to it the more you think about it, and actually the more I'm thinking about it now while I'm looking at it. So it's a very interesting album cover. I don't like the fuzziness somewhat. I actually think it would look cooler if it was more clear, but still a great album cover. I like the symbolism of it. So I'll give this a 4 out of 5. It makes you want to listen to it. At least makes me want to listen to it. But more importantly, the music. So this is a fantastic album. It's 19 songs long. The first 10 are the truth side, and the remaining 9 are the sacrifice side. Lots of really strong songs on this album. So let me point out some of the highlights. You've got Übermacht. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Terminate the Unconcern. You have La Resistance. Tirpitz, Truther. Critical Mass. And you can even add in Eagles Among Vultures. I prefer the sacrifice side of this album a lot. I don't know what it is about it, but lots of awesome tunes on this. And I could bold really a lot of these. If they were to whittle this down to just the 13 best songs on the album, it would be basically a pretty flawless album. There's not much filler in here, although I put What War Means and Expatriate, I think I'm saying that correctly, as 2s, were the only 2s that I gave out of 19 songs. That's pretty darn good. Most of the rest were 3 to 5 range. I gave the ones that I listed as the highlights 5s. Übermacht is a really strong song, has a really cool heavy groove. Heaven Shall Burn is really great because they can be really heavy while still having melody to their riffs. And they add in other instrumentation like synthesizers and other components like orchestral arrangements. And there's even one song on the second side, what's it called? The Sorrows of Victory, which is a ballad essentially. And you got clean vocals from their lead singer, which is kind of neat. So, Terminate the Unconcerned, super heavy song. The Ashes of My Enemies is also a super heavy song. I give that one a solid 4. They start the album off with March of Retribution, a good instrumental introduction. I always like when albums start off with kind of like an interlude. I think it's a good intro to the album, although I don't think that's the only way you can open an album, but very strong in this case. It's hard to pick a favorite off of this. There's like 6 excellent songs on here that I put on my playlist for Metal 2020, and then I find myself searching all the time, wanting to look at. Critical Mass is a really good one. Tirpitz and Truther, which are all just back-to-back excellent songs. You can just start from that point and just listen all the way through to the rest of the album. It's really good. I find a lot of times when I'm listening to an album, sometimes they put all the strong stuff in the front and then more of the experimental stuff towards the back, or just their less strong sort of things at the end. But this one, a lot of their strength is really at the end, but it's also at the beginning. So it's really worth a listen to check them out. I guess my one criticism, and this is just maybe a criticism of death metal generally, is the vocals can sound very samey, which makes the music sound very much similar. So it makes it hard to listen to this album all the way through in one listen. It can be very heavy, and maybe it's just my untrained ear to listen to blast beats kind of nonstop with that heavy riffage that they have, and then have that same vocals, because it doesn't have much variance to it, and I can't really understand what he's saying very well. I have to follow along with the lyrics. to understand the meaning of the song, and maybe I just don't have a trained ear for it. But at the same time, I can understand Randy Blythe and Lamb of God. He enunciates his words very well, and he can go into deep guttural muttering and almost like spoken word, all the way to high-pitched screams and wails and banshee shrieks and everything in between, which gives a lot of variance to their music while still staying in the death growl feel. So I feel like it's doable, and this singer has a really good death growl. It just doesn't vary much. So that would be my only criticism of it. But the music is still really excellent. It makes you want to headbang. It makes you want to get into a mosh pit, although I don't really like to do mosh pits anyway. And I enjoy that they add other instrumentation in there. Even in Tirpitz, there's some cool church bells. I love that in metal. I think church bells give an ominous, doomy feel. There's something about church bells. They're not supposed to sound evil, but for some reason they do. They sound very ominous and foreboding. And I think that adds a lot of strength to some of their songs. Truther just has a super heavy groove that's just worth checking out. So this album's really worth a listen. It's probably something you want to listen to piecemeal. It's an hour and 37 minutes long, so I find myself listening to 2 or 3 songs at a time, and then I go on to something else, listen to something else, watch a movie, then I listen to it 2 or 3 songs at a time, which most of the time I like to listen to an album all the way through. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's so heavy, and the vocals can sound so much the same. I need a break to come back to it and appreciate the music again. At least that was my experience with it, which might be strange. So overall, this album is phenomenal, worth a listen. I give this one a 5 out of 5.